There we
Yes,
go.
and welcome to the Dead Man's podcast, and we are honored to have you as a guest here at the Dead Man's podcast.
Thank
We
you.
can begin by having a brief introduction about you.
Please go ahead.
Uh, Dead Man's podcast is a project of the Dead Man's company where we host different people to educate people about career development, about personal development, about business. We talk about books, and sometimes we also talk about mental health and religions.
Mm-hmm.
So now we are having you as a musician, as a classical guitarist. First of all, what would you like people to know about you as Jonathan?
You know, they can find out anything about me by typing Jonathan Taylor guitar into Google, and they'll find tons of videos and and tons of audio recordings. I have 32 albums, Warner Brothers and Hit Lab recording artists, toured all over the world, and have changed the repertoire, meaning not just the classical masterworks, but added to the repertoire from many different genres of music.
Okay, so there are, the music industry is very big, and there are other different genres, other different musical instruments. So, what initially drew you to the classical guitar, and who was your early musical influences?
Well, I saw a concert by Segovia at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in downtown Los Angeles, and that pretty much sealed the deal. It is a mystery as to why one person wants to become something and another one is just enjoying listening. That is, of course, a question maybe beyond mankind's understanding. So I heard that, and the polyphony and the artistry, not just the technical mastery, how could his fingers do that, but also the transcriptions of where it was complete in itself, the pieces, the Bach, so forth. That was an inspiration.
Okay, so can you describe your daily practice routine and how you approach mastering new pieces?
I practice about 40 minutes a day.
40 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you prepare for a performance?
I don't.
You're always ready?
Yeah, but it doesn't mean anything to prepare if you don't, it's like nowadays people get trophies for not even being anything, compensation trophies. And so nervousness or preparing doesn't really have anything to do with my playing, because one can only be nervous if they don't know what they're doing. And to prepare means you're not ready. So I learn pieces and I perform them.
Okay, nice. So who are your favorite composers to play, and what makes their work stand out to you?
I don't have any favorite composers. I like all types of taste and artistry and whatever era it's from, and whether it's classical or jazz or pop. I don't really care for rap because I don't think it's music, it's just rhythm, it's rhyming. But in terms of, and it lacks the other two elements, melody and harmony. But other than that, I will listen to any type of music. And so there.
Okay, so as a teacher, what is your philosophy on instructing students in classical guitar?
Say that again. As a teacher, what?
As a teacher, what is your philosophy on instructing students in classical guitar?
On instructing students? My what on instructing them?
Philosophy.
Philosophy?
Yes.
Wow. Well, that's a large question. So I'll answer it this way. 85% of all guitarists that exist on the earth today are probably at a first to third year level, but they don't know it. And they don't know it because they have no way to measure their skill level. to acquire skills requires great discipline. There's an old saying, the dream is free, the hustle is sold separately, batteries not included. It's easy to dream about something, no matter what it is. That's like a first step and kind of the baby step. But to actually go through the work, that is a very, that's the important step. Everything else, yeah, all right, I'll give you an example. For thousands of years, men dreamed about going to the moon. It took Americans to do that. When people say humanity went to the moon, I go, humanity did not go to the moon. Americans went to the moon. And humanity did not pay for it. The American taxpayer paid for it. Humanity did not come up with the rocket fuel or the Saturn V. Americans did. So to go through the work is what's important. The dreams are not that important, maybe initially in a small way. So if you ask me my philosophy, I'd say, like Edison said about the light bulb, and about many of his inventions, 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. Most people don't see their opportunities because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. So I think that what's important is that you go through the work and the labor to do something.
Okay, so nice. What do you find most challenging and rewarding about becoming a classical guitarist?
That there was no pedagogy like there was for the piano for 300 years, or for the violin, or the viola, or the viol da gamba. There's pedagogy for that. For the classical guitar, there was very little. There is some, but it didn't have years of the, let's say, the Bartok Misokosmos or the Clementi sonatas or whatever it is to instruct people in keyboards, for instance. With the classical guitarists, you may have the Sohr studies, you may have the Carulli and the Carcassi and the Aguado and the Tarrega, but those are not, those are more the actions, you know, practice scales. It doesn't matter if you practice scales forever if you don't know how to practice them. So the pedagogy, doing that is much more important than saying, learn this scale. How do you learn it? What is the impetus behind playing those? How do you get from zero to hero? How do you get, that is a pedagogy. And so in the classical guitar, there's not that much, or there hasn't been that much. Now there is more with the internet, but still a lot of talk and very little wisdom. You know, it's one thing to have information, it's another thing to have wisdom.
Yes. So what would be your advice to people who want to grow as classical guitarists?
Study with a master. Go to a university for 4 years. Go to dedicate your life to it. You'll need at the beginning 6 hours a day, 5 hours a day.
Okay, so
if you don't, there's a saying that people, if you don't have the passion to do it, you shouldn't do it. I don't believe in making people learn the piano or learn the violin. I don't believe in those ideas. My mother certainly never did that, or my grandmother. So if you don't have the passion for it, if you have a passion for something, you'll follow it. There's a saying, people say, oh, I don't have any money. And I go, empty pockets never stopped anybody. Empty hearts and empty minds did.
okay, which means that you should only do it if you are not ready to do it.
Only if you want to do it. Who's going to make you, you see? People that become virtuosos are not made by other people. They are themselves trying to discover. In the end, you don't improve a piece. The piece is already written. You improve yourself. In the end, when you play a piece, it is not that you make the piece better. The piece already exists. Let's say it's a Bach bourrée. That piece already exists. What you're doing is by improving yourself, you have more erudite rendition of that work.
Okay, so can you share with us a memory of one of your most impactful performances?
I had one in Romania, 6 encores that at the Târgu Mureș, city of Târgu Mureș, at the Palace of Culture there. That's memorable because I had another one that was in the Amazon, or actually that was in Rio in Brazil, that was memorable because I was in a good place and everything came out well. So, you know, it's not, once you get to a certain level, you can't do a bad performance. You may do a less inspired performance, or you may do a less on point performance, but it's hard to do a bad performance because of what you are, what you have become. Life is not finding yourself. Life is building yourself, becoming, learning new skills, new ideas, new ways. It has very little to do with your circumstances or your economic status or your the bad things that maybe happen to you. It has everything to do with, are you willing to do the work, and are you passionate about becoming a master of classical guitar or a violin, or, you know, a sports person. Look at Larry Bird, you know, and the other artists of that field, you know, the Lakers team and the people on that team. They practiced, you know, many years to be skillful at putting that ball through the hoop. So I think you have to have a passion for it, and you have to have discipline.
Okay. So about instrument choice, what do you look for in a guitar, and do you have a favorite instrument?
I own a Antonio Marin Montero guitar valued at about $12,000 now, that I've had for 45 years. I have one guitar, and I've played that one for the past 45 years.
Oh.
I don't collect guitars or collect things like other people do, because I can only play one guitar at a time. And I see no reason to do that. I know other people collect musical instruments and do that, or they collect electronic gizmos and that. But I don't do that because I wanted to become a real player. And I knew that would require me learning the skills of that particular instrument, in my case, classical guitar.
Okay, so have you collaborated with other musicians or ensembles, and what was the experience like?
When I played in Barbados years ago, Barbados, the Caribbean,
Yes.
and played at the Frank Collymore Hall, put on master classes. I represented America as America's musical ambassador, as a kind of a joint Barbadian-American diplomatic thing, and participated in the crop over festivals and the festivals there. I taught, and I met my dear friend Hal Archer, who's a flautist, Barbados' greatest flautist. He lives in New York now. And so we did 2 albums together. I flew him out here to California, and we did 2 albums together. So if you see my albums, you'll see 2 of them are with my dear friend Hal Archer, who is the greatest flutist in Barbados.
Okay, so about modern classic music, what are your thoughts on modern classic music, and do you incorporate contemporary pieces into your repertoire?
Well, one of my goals was to adapt many different genres to the classical guitar. An example of that would be American folk songs. I took the film scores from The Wonderful Wizard of Oz and from the James Bond films, and reduced them to a kind of a magnum opus for classical guitar. And so I've adapted or transcribed or arranged many works from many different fields. I'm just giving you examples of the film scores of American folk songs. Let's say jazz pieces by Duke Ellington or George Gershwin, pieces by even pop pieces that were in the psychedelic era, adapted them for classical guitar. So I've done not only the masterpieces, the Spanish masterpieces that everyone is familiar with, recuerdos, Leyenda, etc., and the standard repertoire, but also to adapt and change. And the reason for that is I believe that people will be sucked into classical music by taking a different pathway, something that's familiar to them. When you have something that's familiar to you, you can then kind of ease that person into more sophisticated music.
Yeah, sure. So about your recording process, can you walk us through your recording process for an album?
Sure, I sit in front of a microphone and play. That's it.
Okay, so on audience again.
There's nothing complex. There's no gizmos. There's no fakery. There's no, adding, trying to compensate because you don't have musicianship or skills. It's none of that. In other words, when you're a solo classical guitarist, you're naked on stage. You're exposed. You can't cover up things like they do with electronics and that. You have to know what you're doing. You have to be skilled. To record what I record, what do? I sit in front of a microphone, maybe a Neumann, maybe an AKG, maybe a SM58, it depends, 57, 58, and I play, and that's all there is to it.
Which means it is actually live, as you would do in front of the people.
Pardon me?
Which means that your recording is as live as you would do in front of the people.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you engage with your audience during a performance, and why do you think this is important?
Sure, I talk to them. In other words, I tell them stories of the pieces. I tell them why Bach wrote in this manner. Why, for instance, I'll give you an example of the wonderful Wizard of Oz that I transcribed. I could tell during the concert, I will tell stories about how that film came about and why you should never have heard Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It was taken out of the film 3 times, and now it's become one of the most beloved American classics of the American songbook in the last 100 years. And so I tell stories about that and about why certain compositions adapt well and where they came from. For example, in the Over the Rainbow song, it is true that Louis B. Mayer hired Hyman Arlick, a son of a Jewish cantor, also known as Harold Arlen, to write the songs for the Wizard of Oz film, but they had done all the songs and then needed a ballad, and Harold Arlen was driving down the Sunset Boulevard going to a matinee at 4 o'clock at the Grauman's Chinese Theater and saw a rainbow. And that truly was the inspiration. Sounds like a bunch of nonsense, but it truly was the inspiration for that song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. So that's some of the stories I talk about, and about how it got taken out of the film many times and then reinserted. Initially, the head man, Louis B. Mayer, didn't like it at all. And finally, what has it become? It's become one of the great ballads. So those are some of the songs. Those are some of the stories that I will go into about music that I'm playing, depending upon what I'm playing. Okay. Right? I was just playing Putting on the Ritz by Irving Berlin and adapted that for the guitar, for the classical guitar. And I was playing a song by the Electric Prunes called I Had Too Much to Dream last night and adapted that. And that's a very difficult thing to do. It's much easier to write for orchestra than to adapt for the classical guitar, at least for me.
Okay, so looking back on your career, what are some highlights that stand out to you?
That I played in many different locales that were not, you would think one plays in Europe and North America, the civilized world, you would imagine that, you know, that is the common right. But I played in very different places. I played in India. I played in the Amazon as well. I played in the Philippines. I played in, I said, behind the Iron Curtain in Hungary and Romania, and so very unusual places, as well as the normal stuff you'd think for concert halls.
Okay, so about your future projects, do you have like any future projects coming soon?
I'm constantly filming all over the country here. Tuesday or Wednesday, I'll be driving to Palm Springs. Right now, I'm in Laguna in Orange County in Southern California, and I'll be driving to Palm Springs to do filming of performance videos, meaning, you know, me playing in a different environment out, you know, a location environment outside in that. So that's what I'm doing now. And I'm negotiating with attorneys to publish more of my 32 album, 300 track catalog. I'm right now a Hit Lab and Warner Brothers recording artist.